Hey everybody, it's SkepticMystic from the Obsidian forums and from the Discord. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use Breadcrumbs and all of its new features from scratch, from a fresh install of the plugin. Just an overview if you haven't heard of Breadcrumbs before. It's a way to add hierarchical structure to your notes. With regular Obsidian, you can use folders and tags, but when you're linking to other nodes, there isn't really a way to create a hierarchy between your nodes. And so Breadcrumbs is a way that enables that. It's very flexible, as we'll see, customizable. You can create the structure in many different ways, and it's non-constraining. So whereas there's a big debate over whether to use folders or other means of creating structure, using Breadcrumbs to create that structure doesn't constrain you in the same way that folders do. A node can have multiple parents, for example, where a node can't be in two folders at once, but we'll get into that. So the main way that we're going to create this structure is what I'm just going to call regular breadcrumbs. And we have to set that up to begin with. So I may still need to install the plugin. You can come over to the community plugins list, search for Breadcrumbs and install it. So to first set up, what we need to do is come over here into the Breadcrumbs settings, go to the hierarchies tab. And you'll see here there's a bit of documentation, but I'm going to be going through this anyway. And what this is a hierarchy. You can have multiple hierarchies, and Breadcrumbs comes with this one hierarchy by default. And what this is saying that is if you want to point to a node as the parent of the current node, for example, you can use the up field name. You can use same to indicate a sibling relationship, down for children, next and previous for those two relationships. And so you can change this as well. You could have multiple upwards field names. So up or parent would point upwards from the current node. You can even create multiple hierarchies from scratch. So this could be like dad, brother, mom, for example. And so this would be an entirely different hierarchy, which has its benefits, as we'll see. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the default hierarchy that comes with Breadcrumbs on a fresh install. Good. So with that, we can say, let's create a node for myself. And we can say that pointing up is the node towards my dad. And so we can put this in the YAML of the nodes, like so. And I'll also show an example of using data view inline fields as well. And so this is already enough to now leverage the power of Breadcrumbs. If it isn't already open, you can open the matrix view from the command palette using this command. It's already open on my Obsidian. And anytime we change the structure, we need to refresh the index just to make it reflect on Breadcrumbs' side. And we can see here that it recognizes this relationship. It's saying that in the upwards direction from the perspective of me is my dad. And so we can click on that node. It will create the node if it isn't already created. And already an interesting feature of Breadcrumbs is that now that we're on the nodes about my dad, we can see that Breadcrumbs knows that going downwards in the opposite direction is the nodes about me. Because if my parent is my dad, then I must be my dad's child, right? It picks up that implied relationship given the real relationship in the upwards direction. And so we could then say that my grandpa on my dad's side I'll just get rid of that apostrophe. So pointing upwards from my dad is his dad. We could refresh the index to have that reflect. And we'll see that it's implied that I'm my dad's child, and there's a real relationship pointing upwards to my dad's dad. And again, if we then move to my dad's note, it's implied that his child is my father. Good. I'm going to install the data view plugin. I prefer the inline fields. If you haven't heard of data view, it's a very popular plugin. And one feature that it enables is inline metadata. So we could say, for example, someone on the same level as my dad's dad is grandma on my dad's side. They are on the same level of the family tree. We refresh the index, that's reflected. Good. We could jump to that note, and it's also implied that my grandpa is on the same side, same level of the family tree as my grandma. That implied relationship. Good. All right, so that's already quite a useful feature. We can start like fleshing out these hierarchies. We could move through them quite quickly, go towards this and say, perhaps my mom is, yeah, so you can add multiple notes in the same relationship, and that will be reflected as such. Interesting feature, if we remove that and go to notes on my mom and add here, that downwards is me. This is still, because I haven't refreshed the index, this still reflects the old value, and so that's gone now. If we then add that back, there's now a real relationship pointing towards me, and the implied relationship pointing back up towards my mom. Good. So that's a basic overview of the matrix view. You can also show it as a list. It's showing the same information just in this like drop down. Yeah. I'm going to show. So this is the first, most basic way of creating structure in your vault. It's very manual, very customizable. And we can leverage that structure using the matrix view. I think next, the trail view is a good place to pick up from. So if we go into reading mode, what used to be called preview mode, we can see here that we get this trail view. And this then points upwards. It shows all paths going up the parent tree from the current node. So my dad's, from my dad's perspective, going upwards is his grandpa. And from this node, it has no real or implied parents because this node doesn't have any upwards fields. And, we could also make this more explicit by saying going down from my grandma is my dad. Just let that refresh. And when we change to this mode, you can see that from my dad's perspective, his dad and his mother are both his parents. And if we step down to the note about me, we can see a bit more. We can see that both my dad and my mother are my immediate parents, and we can see the parents of those nodes. This is shown in both of these views. By default, this just shows the shortest path going up the parent tree. And because I haven't filled in my mom's parents, that's going to be the shortest path going upwards, but we can see all of them. I prefer the grid view, and there are a lot of settings that you can toggle. So under the trail or grid view, you can make it show in edit and live preview mode. You can make it show only the grid view, for example. I'll show that in a moment. Yeah, so this gives another means of quickly navigating our notes using the structure that we've set up. I think I'll show the stats view, and then we can go into some of the different alternative hierarchies, some different ways of creating structure. So the stats view shows us a lot of numbers. It breaks down each of your different hierarchies. Currently, we only have this one hierarchy, right? We could add some more, and I'll show that in a moment, but it breaks down each of your hierarchies and shows the number of nodes in each direction. So we can see that there are 3 nodes that are being pointed upwards, being pointed to in the upwards direction. There are 2 edges using this upwards field, and we can see them here. Yeah, so there's a lot of information that you can get out of this. And if you click on one of these cells, it copies that information to your clipboard. So we could just paste those relationships in, yeah, and do with them whatever you need to. And so that's the stats view. And if you have multiple hierarchies, it will break down the stats about each of them. All right, so let's look at alternative hierarchies now. These give you often an easier way of creating this structure than the more manual approach that I've shown so far using the metadata fields. And let's start with tag notes. So I'm going to create a new note called tag note. And a tag note takes, it looks, let's show it like this. So in the YAML of your note, you will type out VC dash, and you'll see a few different options pop up. We want to select tag notes. So you can just fill that in. And to indicate that a note is a tag note, it needs this field and a tag that you want it to look for. So I'm just going to use the tag, say, book, for example. And nothing will happen right now because I don't have any tags in this vault. But if I say, make a book called Sapiens and give it the tag book, we go back to this tag node and refresh, we can see that it's picked up that this node here has the tag book, and it points to it in the upwards direction by default. Right. So you can do quite a lot with that. You can say the Bible, for example, make that a book. And now it's got both of these nodes being pointed to in the upwards direction, and we can see that being reflected in the trail view as well. But so you can also customize what field it uses by choosing the tag node field. And we can say point downwards instead of going up, and it will do so. And because that's been updated, it's now accurate that this node has no real or implied parents. Good. So you can do quite a lot with that. It works with subtags as well. If you look for, say, like source notes books, this will only show books, but if you have, say, like films, for example, and you only look for source nodes, it will show books and films, right? All right. Another feature is a link note. A link note is set up in a similar way. You say make a link note, and for this, it takes in the field that you want to use. So let's make a link node pointing upwards. And this takes all links leaving the current nodes and points to them in that direction. As we can see there, we could add more notes, say point to Sapiens as well. And it will reflect. We could say point in the sibling direction, and that will be reflected. Good. So a link node takes all nodes, all links leaving the current node and points to them in the direction or using the field that you give it. All right. The next type of alternative hierarchy is a folder note. And as the name suggests, we're going to need a folder. So for a folder note, we set it up by saying VC folder note and a field name that we want to use. And this will take all other nodes in that folder and point to them using the field name specified, as we can see there. We could use down, for example, add another note, refresh that, and it will be reflected. And it's also implied that from this node's perspective that the folder node is its parent. And because they share the same parent, these other two must be that node's siblings. So that relationship is also detected. Good. So tag, folder, and link notes. We can also show traverse notes. So I'll use this as the example. So a traverse node doesn't require a folder structure. A traverse node can be thought of as the logical conclusion of the link nodes. I'll show what that means now. So we're going to create some nodes like so, and the traverse node is going to point to 1 and 2. So these two nodes are leaving the traverse node that is going to be soon. If we go to node 1 and make it point to 1.1, go to 2, make it point to 2.1. We've got this like tree structure going from the traverse node, going to 1, which has this node leaving it. And we can leverage that by calling this a traverse node, make it point downwards. And if we refresh that, we can see it detects these two, just like a link node does. But it also detects now the links leaving those nodes. So more formally, it performs a depth first traversal going down from the traverse node or whatever field you give it. And it traverses that tree structure. So we can see that 1.1 has 1 as its parent, and that has traverse node as its parent. We could extend that even further. If we refresh that and so on, we could make it branch. And yeah, this will just keep working, a traverse node. Good. I'll show hierarchy nodes. I don't think I'll show CSV nodes. There's a section on that in the README. But let's have a look at hierarchy nodes. So a hierarchy node is a way to define a lot of relationships in one node externally from the nodes that you're creating that structure for. So that's a lot to take in, but we just use this list structure. So I'm going to say A is at the top. Underneath that is little a and little b. And so that's a basic hierarchy node. And so we, to make it work as a hierarchy node, we need to go to alternative hierarchies, hierarchy nodes, and point it to this node. So it can be called whatever you want it to be. You just have to tell it which one. And you can also use a comma-separated list of multiple hierarchy nodes. So that's now set up. The index has been refreshed. And now if we go to the node at the top of that hierarchy, we can see that it's detected that these two are its children. Yeah, and so on. And so we could extend that even further. We could say like the child of small a is a.1, 2, b.1, 1.1, for example. Refresh the index, go to b, and we can see going downwards is b.1, going down from there is b1.1, and all of its parents going up the parent tree are shown there. Good. So you'll see that the hierarchy node isn't part of that hierarchy. This is done by default so that you can keep that structure externally. But if you wanted to include it, you could simply go to the nodes at the top of the hierarchy and say point upwards to the hierarchy nodes, and then it will be part of the hierarchy now. Yeah. Good. So you can do quite a lot with that. There's also the hierarchy node adjuster, which lets you do quite a few things. You can jump to a specific section of your hierarchy node if it gets quite long. So currently that line is selected, but if we click here, we'll jump to that line. And another interesting feature is that from anywhere in Obsidian, you can do this. If I run this command, add a parent to say A.1, so shift up. That doesn't seem to be working. Okay, there's a bug there. I'll fix that. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, that's not the most common feature. So those are hierarchy nodes. It's a nice way to keep that structure externally from the rest of the nodes that are in that hierarchy. I won't show CSV nodes, but that's a way to basically create a hierarchy node using a CSV file. So you can do quite a lot with that. Let's take a look at some of the other views. So I've shown these three views, the matrix, the trail, and the stats view. There's also a downwards view. This is basically the opposite of the trail view. If we go to a node with a lot of children and open the down view, we can see all of its children as follows. So this bad example is just showing exactly the same content, but if we then jump to A, we can see that A's children are A and B, and the children of those nodes are like so. This will also work nicely with the traverse node. This is showing what the traverse node is really doing all in one view, right? Which another feature of the down view is that you can freeze it on a particular node. So now it's frozen on traverse nodes. And so if we jump to other nodes, the down view doesn't change until you unfreeze it, and then it will snap to the current nodes. Another view is the duck view, named as such because these are the nodes that don't have breadcrumbs. They're the nodes that are looking for breadcrumbs. Currently, there's only these two nodes, but it can get quite long. So there's a way to filter this using a regular expression or just a literal string. You can toggle this on so that the result has to include the query that you're looking for, or that it must exclude the query that you're looking for. None of these include Z, and so both of them show because none of them have Z in them. Yeah, that's a nice way to see which of your nodes don't have any breadcrumbs. Good. The last view is the visualization view. You can open that by clicking this little TV icon. As you can see from that notice, this is still quite experimental. Not all of these features work very well. But yeah, so there's a few ways to then visualize the structure created with your breadcrumbs. The best working way is the force-directed graph. This is like Obsidian's graph view. You can like click and drag the nodes around. You can jump to a particular node by clicking on it. The current node is highlighted. Yeah, you can do quite a few things, change the color. Yeah, and there's a lot to play with here. Again, not all of them are working because visualization is difficult. The arc diagram works quite nicely. You can choose a particular relation for it to show. So these are all of the sibling relationships in the vault. Yeah, quite a lot to play around with there. Good. So those are the main features. I'm going to show a few more miscellaneous things that you can do with breadcrumbs. The first thing is that you can run this command, write breadcrumbs to file. And so if you've got This is a bad example. Yeah, so let's use it on this node. So if you've got a node with real relationships, that's going to imply the reverse relationship on a different node. So nowhere in this vault is there a breadcrumb field saying point from me to the mom node. It's just implied because of this relationship. And so we can use the write breadcrumbs to current file command to fill in that relationship. As the notice says, you have to have the meta edit plugin enabled for this to work. And if you don't want to install meta edit, you can also change a setting, which I'll show you now. But that will restrict you to only using inline fields as opposed to metadata. Yeah, and so it's filled in that field for us. And so if we refresh that, now both of these relationships are real. You can see that it writes it using a particular syntax. Both of them work, but it is better to put it in strings, in quotes. Yeah. Let's run it here. So going to breadcrumbs, settings, write breadcrumbs to file. You can set it so that it only picks or writes particular fields of your choice to the current file. You can choose exactly which ones are written, which of the implied relationships are written. And you can also enable data view inline fields as opposed to YAML fields. So this node has two implied relations. We write breadcrumbs to current file, you can see that both of those are then added as real relationships, just making those, merging those implied relationships into real ones. Good. So that's the write breadcrumbs to file command. We can also use the create index command. The traversal nodes is a good example. So we know that the index or that the full downwards tree looks like this from the down view. And we can run the create index or local index, or copy a local index to the clipboard. This says from the current node, take all of the children, their children, and keep going and copy that to the clipboard. And we get the same structure copied over to the clipboard. So it's almost creating a hierarchy node for us. You can also copy a global index. This takes all of the local indexes from every node and just smushes them together. So we can see like the tag node has no children, for example. Yeah, and the hierarchy node has the following children. Yeah, a few things that you can do with that. We can use this jump to a direction command. So jump to the first of each of these directions. It's nice to bind those to the arrow keys. So if you're on a particular node with an up, with a parent, you can say jump to the first up, and it will then jump to that node's parent. And you can do that for each of them. So we can say jump to the first sibling. Okay, I don't think I've implemented it for siblings. Okay, so you can jump to the first up from here, jump to the first down from here, and just very quickly jump around your nodes. One thing I haven't shown is the next and previous relationships. So we can make a node for the year 2021, for example, and say that the next year is 2022. We refresh that, we see that the next node is there. And this also shows up in the trail view. So now we can quickly jump between the previous and next nodes. We can go to, we can say that the previous year is 2020. And that will be reflected there. And just another way to like very quickly jump around your nodes. So we can say jump to the next. And we'll do so next. Yeah, so if you bind these to the arrow keys, it's a very quick way to move around. Good. And the last thing that I'll show is a very new feature called threading. So we can say in 2022, so if you're on a particular node and you want to create a new node, create a new next from the current node, for example, we could say create a new next and it will automatically be named. We can rename that to say 2023. Yeah. And so it will automatically fill in that the previous node is the one we just came from. And in that previous node, it will fill in that the next node is the new one that we just made. So this threading feature, we can say create a new up from the current node. And we can say like the 2000s. Yeah, just this entire millennium. Yes. And so yeah, that'll create a parent for the node. So this is just another way to like quickly create these links between your nodes. Good. I think I'm going to finish there. There is a lot to play around with, lots that you can customize, so many different options for each of the features that I've just shown. Yeah, so have a play around with it. And please do let me know if you find any bugs or struggle to get started. I'm always happy to answer questions on the Discord or yeah, on the GitHub repo. Cool. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope this was really helpful.